Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Three Body Problem. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I want to say my experience with this series. Obviously, this is my first time experiencing this story. I've never seen I've never read the book, but I also believe there was a maybe movie or TV show adaptation before now, like a couple years back, I want to say. But I've never seen that either. So, like I said, this is my first time experiencing the story. And looking at, I think I watched the teaser, maybe I watched the full trailer too, and maybe it's just been a while. So, I remember not fully grasping what this series is really about. But then, like, I read a little bit of a synopsis, and I was like, that kind of stuck in my head. I knew it kind of had to deal with aliens. And I knew there was some stuff of like, okay, so some of the stories taking place in the past, some of it's taking place present day. I thought I remember, and maybe this is kind of a spoiler, but I think there's some parts of the stories that take place in the future. But once again, it's still like, they throw a lot at you in this first episode, because when we're introduced to a lot of stuff, I mean, first and foremost, we start off in China in 1966, and like there's kind of this public rally, and I guess, I don't know if like, this is apparently, for what I was reading online, because I wanted to see whether or not this was like just true to China during this era or whatever, but they were basically like putting any physicists on display who kind of leaned more toward Western thought processes and thinking is like, oh, we don't need you sharing the same scientific ideology as other scientists like an Einstein, who ended up helping make the atomic bomb and stuff like that. So it was more of that type of just like, once again, kind of getting the Western influence away from us, of like, oh yeah, the evil West type of situation. And kind of one of our, I guess, main characters, and like it seems like she's going to be our main character in the past. It seems like she might not play as big of a role present day, but that's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to butcher her name, but I think it's Wenji. Her father was like put on display, but he's making references about like basically like you can't twist things, like physics is physics, and he's kind of like explaining the Big Bang Theory, but it also leaves open to like, oh, the possibility of God existing. It's like science doesn't really just say God does exist, nor does it say that God doesn't exist. It just, it leaves the possibility open. Like nothing's like hard confirmed in that capacity, and they proceed to, because it's like, once again, it's like the country is moving in one direction, and you having these, as they kind of labeled it, like counter-revolutionists, because it's during, like, I believe it was labeled as like a cultural revolution what's happening at this time. But because if you kind of go against the grain, you're seeing like the one guy was brought out on display, and so was Wenji's father, and her own wife was kind of brought up to be like, yeah, call him out, publicly shame him along with all of us. And they proceeded to beat him because he refused to kind of go back in what he believed. Like he wouldn't like shift to what they wanted to. It was kind of like a re-education of, okay, say that everything you said was wrong and you recognize it's wrong, so that you can be re-educated and potentially find a way. But he wouldn't. So who knows what I was about to say we don't know what the ramifications are, but we do with Wenji, like suffering the ramification, because at least the mom was apologetic. I can only assume Wenji never apologized for what her father believed in, because whether she fully shared the same beliefs or not, she's also going to stand, because like stand and agree with her dad, even if she might have, because I'm all over the place, I'm sorry. Because we later on found out that she's not only his daughter, but like his prize student. So a lot of like his tarnished reputation is going to fly to her in twofold. Not only being his daughter, but also his number one student. So now it's like, oh, a lot of his beliefs on the physics side of things, do you think the same way too? That's why she's kind of in that punished situation later on. But it's like, that's kind of a rough thing. And obviously her mom can't have anything probably to do with her ever again, because it's like, right, like you've been labeled this thing. She had to like publicly shame her husband, and they were just going to beat him into submission, but they ended up killing him, because like the crowd was cheering for, yeah, but the moment he stopped breathing, the guards that were beating on him stopped, and then so did the crowd, but they just kind of moved on about it. It's almost like it wasn't that big of a deal, but the main guard that kind of potentially dealt the killing blow, I also wasn't expecting them to lean into it as much as they were when they showed the brutality of that beating. Like, we're just seeing every blow, every hit, like the wounds popping up on it. It's just like, okay, I thought you show a little bit of the beating and maybe just not, but it's like, no, you kind of sit on it, and just makes it that more like gross and just kind of leaves a sickening feeling in your stomach when you just stay on it that long. And I guess just that kind of leans into just the brutality of what they did to him. But also, once again, just the whole like, it seemed like the main guard, she kind of felt bad, but then just kind of like, yeah, it is what it is. And they come back later on for Wenji. I'm unclear of like if she was kind of sent, whether that like that labor work she was doing, I don't know if that was supposed to meant to be like a rehabilitation. I don't think it was, because later on they're threatening, not threatening, but strongly suggesting like, oh yeah, you signed this and we'll send you to a rehabilitation place. So I guess it's probably just meant to be almost like just you're at this camp of for labor. That's just the pure purpose of it. So she met a dude who apparently it seemed like he was like a reporter or something from some very specific news outlet, but he's like, no, I'm not here for that. I'm just here as myself. And it seemed like they started a relationship. How far it got, how serious it got, they snuck around together. He gave her a book, an English book, because apparently she can read and speak English. And what was the whole thing? He was kind of like, it was meant to kind of broaden her horizons of like, right, like obviously this material is banned in China because anything that is going to bring over those Western, like, once again, like scientific ideology is kind of like damned here. So like, don't get caught with the book, but she did. And at first I was wondering if Home Dude sold her out, but I don't think he did. I guess they just stumbled across the book. I mean, it could easily be someone caught her reading it and they maybe caught her stashing her, because it seems like she was hiding it underneath her bed, so easily someone else in that room could have like ratted her out. But she didn't rat Home Dude out. I don't know if it's just kind of like, I'm not a rat in general, so I'm not going to turn on anyone. Like I don't think he sold her out, but that's why I kind of was confused, because I was like, doesn't he work for a news like organization or something? But he was there, so I'm like, oh, are you a soldier who also worked for? Like, is that? Because I was wondering, I'm like, oh, it didn't seem like he was doing any labor here. He was just out and about here. So I guess he's a soldier, and maybe he also worked with the news. I mean, there's obviously different facets of the army and the military across any country. So you could be a reporter there. You could be a part of the military, but be a reporter. So maybe that's what his position was. But yeah. She didn't sell him out, and then they threw her in the cell, and it was like, cool, all you have to do is sign this, and then you could get sent to a rehabilitation. Like, your father wasn't in a position to be forgiven, but you can. All you have to do is sign this. Hey, even your mom signed it, and now it's a whole bunch of names and statements. It's like, oh, like, I need you to confirm that your father believed what he believed, and these other colleagues of his feel the same way. And she refused to sign it because it's like, for one, I don't know if she's actually just, once again, keeping it 10 toes down, like I'm a be very ride or die with this, or is it just gonna be like, no, you're gonna further tarnish my father's name, and I'm not gonna be down for that, no matter what the situation is. So, but she was gonna be left there to basically rot and die. Because the whole thing was like, after this, no, because they were going to move her to a prison specifically as like punishment. But luckily, like, the government, like, there's a program that was like snatched her up. It's like, yeah, you either come with us, and if you go beyond this gate, which her and Home Dude were having a conversation, they're like, yeah, closer you get to that satellite to what's beyond that gate, people are losing hair, like animals start acting weird around the place, which we'll get to in a second. But it's like, yeah, you cross into this gate, you go past this gate, you will never leave. Because I guess it's like, this whole thing is so top secret that it becomes your life. You stay here 24/7. There's no leaving. I mean, I guess because of her circumstances, it's even more so. Like, we can't trust you to be out and about, once again, to like spill this to anyone. So this becomes your home, your life forever. Which obviously we find out later on. Obviously, it doesn't become forever. So obviously some stuff changes, but we'll get to that later. But it was like, yeah, that, or you can go to prison, which she was like, I'll take this. Because it's like, the work situation she was in at the labor, I don't want to just kind of label it as work, but like the labor, I don't know if that was something of given enough time, would she eventually been able to go back home, or just once again her reputation was tarnished because her father's reputation was tarnished, and there was no one doing that, damage maybe. But it's like, I'd rather be here than at a prison, because they specifically grabbed her up because of some work that she had published or written, and that's what got her in this secret project that they're working on. And what was like Red Coast something. And at first it's like, oh, is it a weapon? But it seems like they were sending out a signal that was drawing in all of these birds and stuff, which they were attracted to the satellite and then they dropped dead. But it's not a weapon that it's meant to be. It's meant to be a communications. But I think it's so interesting that it has such an adverse effect. I don't know if it's like what it's actually doing to the birds. Maybe the signal and frequency is so strong that maybe certain species, like a bird or whatever, and animals in general, because animals have better hearing than humans, that maybe the frequencies they're hearing can be so overwhelming that maybe it drives other animals crazy, but maybe it's too strong and ends up killing birds. I don't know. Not unless they were flying direct. I mean, they were flying around a satellite, so it could easily be a thing of they were flying into the satellite and dying from collision. But it seemed like some of them died away from the satellite, like in the vicinity, but so not quite sure what that means. But that's all we have, like, really in 66 and 67, because I forgot there was a time skip after Wenji was kind of grabbed. But then present day 2024, we have Benedict Wong is playing this investigator looking into a whole bunch of physicists and scientists have started like not randomly killing themselves, but it seems so random because it's all around different places, different countries, and all of a sudden they also see these numbers, they go crazy. Like the body we see at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the show, is a guy like literally carved his own eyes out, which is brutal, which is interesting. Well, interesting, it's weird to say, but from what we saw with other people, the little bit we've seen of the crime scene photos of the other situations, there was one dude that doing that Iran with the helmet. Like, this guy seems to be the only one that cut his eyes out, because we had the Vera situation and she just threw herself down in that liquid and drowned. I don't know if just the impact killed her or whether she drowned, which is also, there's like something so unsettling about the rippling of that water and then the liquid and then the stillness across it. I don't know. There's something super unsettling about that imagery. To me, I mean, with the context of everything, it's just kind of like, it's almost like and now she's dead. Like it represents that, and it's just that, I guess that's what the unsettling element to it is. But yeah, like we're trying to figure out, well, Benedict Wong's character's trying to figure out why are these people dying? Like, what's going on here? Why are they killing themselves? Like, nothing in their history showcases that maybe they were depressed or like there were any other attempts to do it. Like, it kind of came out of nowhere. And specifically, it's all scientists, And with Vera's death, it ends up drawing in, like, I guess maybe 5 of our protagonists. I don't think they're going to be our main protagonists, because it seems like this show, and once again, having only watched this first episode, it seems like it's going to be a pretty big ensemble cast, maybe. But we meet people who are connected to Vera. Obviously, she was just talking to Saul before she died. He's kind of trying to prove himself. It's like, right, if you don't have any accomplishment that further science before you're 30, then you've kind of failed and you never will. Because the program they're a part of gets shut down because science has been physics in general has been going a little wonky for like the past month. And Jen talks about it later on, that it's happening to all these different facilities around the world. Everyone's checking the numbers, checking all the code. She's like, I checked lines of code 4 times back and forwards, but everything from here in London all the way to Beijing is like going nuts. Like, it's not making any sense. That's why the project they were a part of, spent their lives on, Vera spent her life on, was shut down. And so, especially because she had this whole conversation with Saul about like, oh, does he believe in God? And he's like, right, just because things aren't making sense doesn't necessarily immediately make this all relevant to God and relate to God in any capacity. So that seems like that's probably going, I mean, if this is about aliens and stuff and the world getting wonky, I think, when science is kind of failing, like, it's like you kind of, I mean, there's people who have faith who are reaching for something higher anyway, but then like when the basics of like how the world and universe works those rules are broken, because he's like, yo, for like 60 years we were so certain how things are, and now those foundational building blocks to our understanding of physics are like wrong. Because he was basically making it like, Kavira had taught him that basically when you have a theory and when you test it out, it that proves that it's wrong when it doesn't work out, like over and over. I've forgotten the exact wording he had given. So, but at the same time, we had Augie and Jen. I had to remind myself, Isa Gonzalez was going to be in it. Just interesting timing too, because I just saw her. She's only in it for a tiny bit, but she's in the Mr. and Mr. Smith TV show on Prime Video. I was surprised when I saw her there. I was like, oh, Isa Gonzalez, that's interesting. Tangents and all that aside, it's interesting that she's our introduction to the Nut Countdown, because we're seeing it firsthand. We've seen the aftermath so far, so now we're introduced as someone who's going through it. And obviously the clock is ticking down, and she's thinking like, what is this about? This doesn't make any sense. Like, at first she's even got like she went to a neurologist to kind of check her out, and it's like, yeah, they can't find anything wrong with you. So it's like, why did I see this, and why am I continuing to see this? Is what she's trying to figure out. It doesn't seem like it's just a thing. I don't know. Like, I guess seeing a ticking clock count down forever just kind of will wear you down, like wear down you mentally and psychically, like from a psychological standpoint. It'll also like it'll wear down your psyche, is what I'm trying to say. So I was like, I wonder if seeing that does anything else. Like, are you actually in pain from it, or is it just kind of like, what the fuck, like I'm trying to process all of this and it's just making my head hurt trying to understand it, or does it actually like make you sick and make you feel bad? I mean, it's whatever this is enough to drive people to like kill themselves in very brutal ways. So there are hints to the whole her and Augie and Saul thing, which I think was interesting. Because even Jack was busting their balls about it. He's like, oh, are you guys fighting? Or fucking? Or fighting and fucking? You know, I'm like, it seems like there's history there. Maybe it's kind of will they, won't they, that happened in the past, but it never fully happened. Maybe it's like, oh, we hooked up, but we were like, oh, let's just stay friends, or just what it is. Because she was upset because it's like, hey, I called him texting him like 3 times. He wants to call me now. I'm ignoring him, but that's when he was calling about Vera. You also have Will and Jen who have a history, but then like she's with her new guy, Raj. Jack has got his snack company, because I saw it on Benedict Wong's character's like board. It said like, oh, Jack, it's like, right, he left Oxford, so he's not like fully like, he's smart and he's connected to this group, but he kind of bailed out of the program. But he ended up like starting a snack company that's like apparently like one of his brands of snacks is being sold as like the 3rd more popular one, as he was basically like, oh, fuck off Pringles or whatever. But he's worth quite a lot of money. Apparently, even Augie has like a company she's making. So we got a little bit on that, but not much. So, but like I said, these 5 characters are people that Benedict Wong's character, he's being told by Wade, who's his superior officer, who's his superior, played by Liam Cunningham. He's one of those actors where I'm like, I've definitely seen you in stuff. I know one thing you're probably best known for is Game of Thrones, because I know them. Was it Benioff and Weiss were the creators of the Game of Thrones TV show? They, I know they're behind this, so like that's the Game of Thrones connection there. But I swear I'd have to look through his filmography, but I'm like, I definitely feel like I've seen Liam and stuff. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I'm like, I know he's in that, but feel like there's something else I know him from, and I'm just not able to place it off the top of my head. Like I said, I'll probably worry about that after the recording. It's interesting because he seems like he knows like where the episode ends, and the way he's pushing like Benedict Wong's character feels like he definitely knows more of what's going on, because he specifically used the phrasing of that. He's like, because Benedict Wong's character's like, what is that? And he's like, that's our enemy. And I'm like, what the, like, I mean, they are an intelligence agency, so they'll usually know stuff before the rest of the world is, and they have to decide, well, when do we distill this information? To be fair, like, this is something that's been decades in the making, because we see like, oh, China was trying to make communications in the 60s. I mean, who's to say the U.S. wasn't doing the same? Well, not just the U.S., because like obviously we're in London, but it's like every country could have just been doing the same thing too. So maybe no one's been sharing what they've interacted with over the years. I don't know, because we did get some interesting reveals and developments where we find out that Wenji, who we get introduced to in the 60s, turns out she's Vera's mom. So it's like interesting. So you've had a part and you've been connected to this, but once again, you left like that facility. Like either something happened to that facility in the 60s or at some point in time in the past, something happened to it and you were able to leave. Like how are you, once again, it seemed like, oh, you're going to be here for the rest of your life, and apparently you weren't. You were able to kind of leave. We don't know what the circumstances are, but you have some connection to this, and your daughter ends up having a connection to it and dying. It's like, maybe back in the 60s you scratched the surface of something more, and now present day it's kind of finally reared its ugly head in a bigger way. I don't know. Once again, like, how the time situation works is going to be really interesting to see, like, bouncing between both stories, and like whether or not like stuff gets crazy in the 60s and then just like for it not to be like, for it to like, maybe it pops off for a little bit but then disappears, or like I said, how much of it is just you are scratching the surface of it in the 60s and it took all these decades later for it to really ripple out and pop off to be like, yo, this is what's happening. So because there's also like that helmet thing, because the physicist from Iran, he died with it on his head, and obviously Wade wants one, so maybe he knows some significance to that, because even that Benedict Wong's character's like partner is like, okay, so who told you that? It's like, well, Wade. Well, who does Wade get his orders from? The government. So maybe they're kind of bringing stuff down on Wade of like, hey, he's filled into maybe a small degree or maybe a large degree of what's going on, and he needs to, rein some of this stuff in and figure it all out. Even though not everyone on the lower end to this totem pole, like Benedict Wong's character, don't have like all the pieces to the puzzle. Maybe Wade doesn't have as many answers as we think he does either, but him specifically wanting a helmet, interestingly enough, we find out Vera had one, which Jen took it, and it's like, oh, like her mom, Vera's mom, Wenji, was thinking it's a video game, and it does seem like some kind of virtual reality thing. I've never seen it, and I've never read it, but it felt very like, oh god, I'm thinking of Ready Player One. I mean, to be fair, another great example would be the uses, because I'm a lot more familiar with it, is the dot hack of it all. Just like, oh yeah, like you're playing kind of like, it's somewhat virtual reality of like, oh yeah, you wear a headset and you're playing like an online game type of thing. But I don't know what that is. If that's like some simulation, like, are you taking over somebody's body and the avatar just happens to manifest itself to look like you? Like, is that preparing you for what's to come? There's so many things there. It's like, it's unclear what that is. Like I said, just episode throws a lot at you and you're just trying to keep up with what's going on. So there's that. I had skipped over the fact is we had the whole situation with Augie getting visited by some woman who was like, oh, let's have a smoke. Yeah, so what's that countdown down to? Like, oh, less than 2 days? It's like, cool. When it goes to midnight tomorrow, look up at the sky. Have you ever had the universe wink at you? You don't ever want the countdown to ever reach 0, because that's when bad stuff happens, which you can assume all the dead physicists is what happens when it reaches 0. Don't know what the hell that means. Which makes me go, does it reset itself after a while? Like, once something kind of pops off, like, she was kind of explaining it a little bit, but I'm like, obviously not in enough details, but I'm like, does it reset after a while? Because at the end of the episode, like, Augie's counter is like at 10 hours. So I'm like, what the hell is she supposed to do with that, But maybe, like, because part of me is almost wondering, like, is it a doomsday clock situation? Because the whole thing is, like, the closer you get to midnight, the worse thing you are. Like, the closer you are to, like, nuclear war, isn't it? Like, that's why I'm wondering, is it supposed to be kind of a more galactic version of a doomsday clock in a sense? I wonder if that's supposed to represent. I mean, to be fair, it's like, when you look at like 12 o'clock could be represented by 0. I think that's what it even kind of represents even on the doomsday clock. I don't know, I might be completely and utterly speaking out of my ass, because I do that a lot. But she had brought Saul along because she's like, I need like a controlled experiment. If I'm seeing one thing, I need to see someone else here that I trust, see what they're seeing. But it was interesting because Saul kept being like, yo, the stars are pretty bright. He's like, they're actually really bright. But Augie's like, okay, you're high, so I can't trust you on that. But it's like, no, they started getting brighter until the point that literally the sky started blinking in a sense by, hey, literally all the stars would blink on it. The sky is literally flickering. And you're like, what the fuck is that? But it also ended up being Morse code because there was the little decoder that Augie had gotten from that woman. And it's like, oh, it's literally a representation of the countdown. It's a Morse code version of the countdown. And as he's counting down, like, obviously so is Augie's countdown as well. So you're like, what is going on here? We've also got, like, what was that guy's name? It's something Evans. Was it Steve Evans? He's a guy who showed up at Vera's funeral, and there was this interesting look between him and Wenji's. Yeah, Wenji. I was about to say Wenji's mom. Vera's mom is Wenji. There was like a look between them, which for a second I was like, that's not like her biological father or something, is it? Like, is he not in her life? Because it turns out, because Benedict Wong's character was like taking photos of him and stuff, because like I said, he was at the funeral, he took off in a helicopter. Apparently he's never made too many public appearances for the past like 40 some years since he took over his father's oil company. So I'm like, what is that about? Is he someone that's in the know? Because he's someone of interest in this investigation as well. Because it's like, oh, there's a gold helmet. Steve Evans is a rich person. Maybe he can end up buying one. So we want to keep an eye on him and his involvement. But like, for him to show up at Vera's funeral must mean he's significant. And I'm curious, does anyone else know who he is? Especially if he's kind of like one of those very shut-in billionaires that like no one gets to see often, because like no one else at the funeral really had much of a reaction except for Wenji when they looked at each other. And maybe that ties into, like I said, if that's maybe that's Vera's biological dad, and just like no one really knows, because from what we could tell, there is no father in the picture currently. So I was like, oh, are they divorced, or did he die? But maybe that's him. The biological dad was the first thing that came to my mind, the way they looked at each other and him coming up to Vera's casket like that. Maybe we'll get more answers to it in the 60s. Like, maybe that's where they initially crossed paths, and maybe that also has to deal with why Wenji's not in China, like why she's in London, and who knows how long she's been here. Was it because the program was shut down and she was able to leave, or was something more disastrous? We'll have to wait and see. Like I said, this first episode is throwing quite a lot at you. It's unclear. I don't think you're immediately supposed to be able to figure out like what the fuck is actually going on, but I'm really curious to see where this all goes, how this all plays out. Like I said, I don't know what to fully expect from the show, and I'm excited to see what happens. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.